So, it just wasn't working for me. Ugh, well, you're an idiot.
Welcome to Not Safe for Words. I'm your host, Crystal L. Kirkham, multi-genre author, editor, and cover designer. I'm here to give you insight into the world of publishing and to help you avoid the mistakes that others have made. So stick around, you're in for one hell of a ride where I don't curb the curses.
Alrighty, a small personal aside before we get into today's topic. If you follow me on social media, you know I have standard poodles. And so, my dogs don't speak English and they sure as fuck aren't going to be listening to my podcast, but I'm wishing Fred and Ryan a happy second birthday because my baby's birthdays are today on February the 2nd and they're 2 years old this year. So I'm happy about that. Now, that's out of the way, because it was very important for me to acknowledge their birthdays, let's talk about today's topic, which is getting and giving criticism. And not just any criticism, we're talking about constructive criticism. Not, it just didn't work for me, but actionable criticism. Now, of course, getting it, actionable criticism, great. Generally, that's a lot easier to receive than most, but not all criticism you receive is going to be constructive in a way that works for you. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So let's start with giving criticism, because it's really important to know how to do this. I've done a lot of beta reading. I obviously have worked as an editor. I am an editor. And as a part of what I do with my own publishing company is I love to give people personal feedback whenever possible on how they might improve their novels if I have to send them a rejection. And I try and make it short but constructive. Having been on the receiving end of many a rejection myself, I know how hard it can be to receive rejection that just doesn't fucking fit, or it feels like the person giving it never even read your fucking book, and you're like, dude, seriously, are you kidding me? And it's not the best reaction to have. It's also not the worst reaction to have. I have seen authors blow up their careers over a 4-star review. And you really don't want to be that person. And we're not talking about actual reviews today. We're talking more in terms of early reader feedback. And we've talked about all the types of early readers in season 1, as well as a great book recommendation that you can read to understand more about different types of early readers. Go back and read that. Fuck if I know what episode it is offhand. It is really late on a Tuesday night and I am in so much pain. So, guys, this is what you're getting from me today. Alright, so as I said, we're starting on the giving end of criticism. And a lot of times when you're reading something and people are asking for feedback, you're just sitting there going, there's something about this I don't like, but I don't know what it is. And sometimes it's hard to give actual good constructive criticism because you as a reader know something isn't working, but you might not be at a level in your writing or editing abilities where you're actually able to put into words what's bothering you about what's going on. And sometimes it's just a matter, in this case, of trying to find words of, I felt myself pulled out of the sentence, or the scene didn't flow. And you might not know why it's not flowing or why you got pulled out, but at least those two phrases are something that as an author you can go back and try and think about it. Well, why were they pulled out, or why did it not flow? And it gives you a starting point. Just saying something, this doesn't work for me, is kind of, useless. What's not working? Why is it not working? How is it not working? You've got to answer at least one of those questions when you're giving constructive feedback, because how can somebody fix something if they don't know what it is that they need to fix in any sort of regard? At least leave a fucking breadcrumb of a trail when you're doing stuff like this. giving constructive criticism is not just saying this doesn't work, but it's saying this doesn't work and I think maybe it's this. And that's all there is to it. I mean, it's really not that difficult, but a lot of people forget about that second part, about trying to pinpoint how or why or what exactly is wrong with what you're reading. Now, it could just be that the person you're reading, their work didn't lead up to that point properly for you to understand whatever is happening currently, which is why it doesn't jive. But that's up to the author of the work you're criticizing to figure out how to fix that or where the disconnect happened. And that, when you're giving feedback, is one of the most important things you can do. A lot of times when people are looking for criticism or feedback of their novel, they're not looking for you to fix all the commas or em dashes or ellipses or little grammatical issues. They're looking at the big picture issues. So this is also, authors, when you're asking for feedback, make sure you're being very specific of what you're looking for. Big picture, little picture, proofreading, they're all very different things. Once again, go back and listen to your early readers, but in short, you need to tell people what you want from them. If you want them to just tell you whether or not the plot flows or if they think there's any potential in the story, then ask for it. And if they give you more, don't get offended. You may not want it, it may not be time for it, and sure, it may rub you the wrong way, but that comes to the portion of the topic when we're talking about receiving criticism, which is an even bigger one, and we're going to touch more deeply on how to deal with getting feedback that you don't always like in many different forms, such as rejection and unwanted opinions. But that's not for today. Today we are talking about just getting criticism. And when you're getting criticism, the biggest thing to remember is if it makes you angry, take a step back. Don't respond. I mean, generally, criticism, when you're asking for it, you are fucking asking for it. So, you know what? If you find yourself getting mad, take your step back and breathe. And sometimes, of course, the feedback you're going to get is absolutely useless shit, like, I hated everything about this novel. Well, that's not great feedback. I mean, chances are you just chose somebody to read your novel and that isn't the right story for them. Total possibility, and you can't discount that as being a part of the learning process of how to find somebody to give you good critiques on your work so that you can improve as a writer. It is a balancing act because a lot of times when you're getting feedback, it is actionable, but it isn't right. And you also have to know your story and know what you want out of your story enough to go, well, what they're saying makes sense as criticism, but it doesn't make sense within my story. Well, then you need to figure out, well, how do I make it makes sense for this person within my story? Not all the criticism you're going to get is going to be actionable for you. You're going to have to learn what to ignore and what to work on. Now, if you have 5 different readers all saying the same thing, whether or not you agree with them, it's definitely something you need to look at. And once again, that biggest thing, you can't get mad about good criticism. You can be a little angry about somebody giving you shit criticism that doesn't give you anything actionable or doesn't tell you anything about your story that might help you improve it and get across the story you want. But you also can't get mad at the person for giving it. Like I said earlier, you fucking asked for criticism. Not everything you're going to get back is solid goddamn gold. Some of it's going to be absolute bullshit. And that is something you need to understand going into anything that you're asking for feedback on. It's not all going to work. It's not all going to be good. And you're not always going to have the right audience reading your work. And that makes a huge difference on whether or not you're going to get criticism that works for you. Now, it is kind of useful to have somebody outside of your regular reader base to read your work and give you feedback on it if you can manage that, because people that don't typically read in your genre, they might notice things about it that are like, well, this is why I don't read this genre, because X, Y, and Z, it's so cliche. And as an editor, I've actually turned down stories simply because they're so cliche. It is such a warm plot. And I'm not convinced the author can bring anything new to it to make it more than what it is. And that often comes from somebody reading outside of their regular genres. Unless you're me, you read pretty much every genre there is. But that aside, you've got to just be calm. And that's probably one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to learn how to do as an author, is to shut your mouth, sit down, and actually think about things that you don't agree with. That's all there is to it. And no matter how much you want to knee-jerk your reaction and go, well, you're fucking stupid if you can't see this, there's a reason most people are going to leave the criticism that they're leaving. You've just got to remember, you know your story better than anybody else. And that is actually a negative when it comes to trying to improve your work. If you know your story so well, you see things in it that somebody who doesn't know your story isn't going to see. And you need to have to figure out how to make them see that. And that's a big challenging part. It's why I know we're going to have a lot of talks about editing and revision and how to think about every little aspect of your novel in future episodes. Not this season, unfortunately. This season is really about the interpersonal aspects of being an author. And of course, let's just get it over and done with now. I've said it a few times. The biggest thing you can do is sit down, shut up, listen, and think. Think about it, not to respond, but honestly, think about it. Try and see things from someone else's point of view. And it's going to make you a better writer. It's as simple as that. The more you listen, the more you think, the more you try and get outside of your own head, the better off you are on trying to get inside of an entirely different viewpoint to write it in your stories. It's surprising how well it works. And when it comes to giving and receiving criticism, getting out of your own head really does help too. Giving good criticism is a matter of practice. Receiving it with grace is a matter of just shutting the fuck up and taking your time. And some people say if you're angry, count to 10. When it comes to your work and how personal many of us can take criticisms to our work, counting to 10 isn't enough. If you have to, if you really need somebody to explain why the fuck they said something they did because it's just gotten you so enraged, then all you have to simply say in a non-confrontational way is this. You said this about this point of my novel. I'm not seeing things the same way you are. Can you please explain to me why you said this? And if you still are infuriated and can't agree with why the person's giving you that feedback, then maybe just put it aside and say thank you. Put it aside, that feedback, not the person, and unless somebody else has the same criticism, ignore it. In case you weren't aware, you can totally disregard, ignore, and not act on any sort of criticism that you get on your work, no matter whether or not you think they're right. You don't have to act on it. Now, I've made it generally a habit because I've been doing this for as long as I have and working with so many different other writers to almost always act on every little critique. Because I will sit there, I will think about it, and I will go, well, I think I understand why they're saying this. I don't agree with it, but if I change this small piece of wording here and that little phrase there, that should stop others who see things the same way from having the same criticism. And that's all it is. You never have to agree, but it's to your benefit to think about it. And that's where you have to come at it from as a critiquer. Not everybody's going to see things the same way you do. And if somebody does ever get angry about the critiques you leave, say, I'm sorry you feel that way. And perhaps reconsider if they ever ask you to critique something again. But if they get that angry, that probably won't be a problem. This has been another episode of Not Safe for Words. I hope you've found some useful advice here today. If so, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can join me next time for more publishing and writing insights. Thanks for listening.